We're going to get going. I'm going to introduce Ryan Hanser. Thank you so much for being here today. Ryan is accredited by the Public Relations Society of America. In his 25 years of executing international, national, and local work, he has earned 2 PRSA Bronze Anvil Awards, which is basically the PR's industry Oscars, which is amazing. He's chaired the word of mouth practice group for Hanser Associates global network offices. Hanser Associates is more than 120 awards that represent quality work on behalf of their clients. They cover a wide range of industries, which is why we're excited to have so many on the call today. They dabble in agriculture, education, business, healthcare, transportation, and of course, small business. So Ryan, I'm going to hand the floor over to you and take us away.
I am grateful to be joining everybody on a lovely morning to talk about word of mouth. And to just call out the depth and breadth of the partnerships resources for small business. To be a part of the series is to be part of a chain of local experts who have delivered a lot of value into a YouTube library. So thanks again for having me. I have a lot of slides and I'm going to move really fast. So if you have questions, please ask them. Because word of mouth is this thing I think we think we all know, right? It's a thing that has been around for a long time. But by diving in, I think we'll not only understand it better, but be able to harness its power pretty directly. So here's the anatomy of what's ahead for us and the conversations in the market you're probably already having. I'm hopeful that, and I'm struggling for controls, you can think about the last conversation that you had. Here's your poll. The last conversation that you had about a product or service. Think about the category that it was in. Because one of the things that we know about word of mouth is that it's ubiquitous. It's across all categories. It's basically how we navigate making decisions. And so word of mouth is about sharing things that are interesting and valuable. And when we talk about it in the context of marketing, it's really the things that our businesses are going to do that are going to earn essentially that conversation, if not recommendation, because there's something so we'll get into the anatomy of this, but there's a social purpose to the story that gets told. It's great to see the results coming in. There is no other category with great intent, because I think what we want to do here is map these to what we know to be true about. Interesting. Media and entertainment is winning. What to watch on Netflix, right? Or Apple, or Disney, or HBO Max. Everybody watching Dune, Ted Lasso. These, the point really here, thanks. The point really here is about mapping the deep end of the pool. So some business categories are, they have more talk in them, right? But again, reinforcing word of mouth is the market conversation across all categories. So you're in professional services, you're in manufacturing, you're a salon. There is market conversation about your category. And the data here in terms of the top 5 comes from a firm called Engagement Labs, which has been in its iterations on the forefront of the research around word of mouth. And I would point out that it doesn't, the online and offline do not map directly, do they? They are distinct. We'll talk more about the difference between offline and online conversation here in a moment. So let's talk in some length then about under the what is word of mouth. Let's talk then about all the little things that are probably the conversations you were thinking about, right? So if markets are conversations and we're sharing and listening, sometimes the sharing is very granular. We helped a bus company build a market with power outlets and Wi-Fi, very small, kind of a comfort kind of a thing. It's the dentist office that has the latest flavor of video title. It's Chick-fil-A, which we have all over this town. How many of you knew that there's a mom valet at Chick-fil-A? Not a mom, I'm like a dad valet for that matter, right? So into the drive-through I go with my van full of children, and at the drive-through, there's an audible for the mom valet, and that means that by the time I have ordered and parked, I come inside and the table is set and my food is waiting for me, right? Remarkable service. So what we're really talking about is experiences broadly, the things that we do and that make us feel, and then we share. Right? Experience. People talk about the experience economy, but the image you're looking at here is Philadelphia. And if you've heard of Patrice Banks, then you know this story. But this is maybe a whole cloth experience and really mission driven. She opened the Girls Auto Clinic, right? I think we all know what the kind of standard experience is with auto repair. So she's has built a whole other thing. And part of that experience really is the wait time. I've been known to go to Ankeny, sit in the waiting room for a bit. They have harvested that wait time with a hair and nail salon, right? So in thinking about customer experience and in thinking about the things that people tell stories about, it can be little or it could be whole cloth. And we're attentive to this because we think it means something to our business. It's worthwhile. It will deliver value. We know it's happening, right? The headline with exclamation points is that depending upon who you ask, we're talking about a super majority of purchase decisions. There's data over the last 20 years looking at the granularity of how much purchase decision is driven by word of mouth. I'm just going to say it's most of it, right? Something approaching 80%. The other thing that might not be intuitive is that your paid reach, your advertising program, your marketing already drives conversation about brand, your business. And so with intention, you can actually start conversations with paid media. When we look at this as a program, it's almost reputation management. It's always going on. But if I introduce a story, a trigger, it's going to be felt pretty much immediately. And really with those first couple of weeks, you're going to be able to see the effects of the market conversation as you've activated it. It's really about trust. It's kind of the fourth point there, way more valuable than anything you're paying for in terms of attention. And ultimately, the loop of a conversation, a two-way dialogue, means that to the extent that you're listening and taking that feedback in, you're probably building a better culture, better operation, and delivering more value for all stakeholders. So ultimately, word of mouth makes you better. So here it is. Again, I think we swim around in this and we kind of know what this is, but before we get into how it works, let's talk about the why. Because basically when we share word of mouth, we're not shilling, right? We are volunteering to be helpful. And these are trust relationships, right? The person I ask a question of is implicitly somebody I trust. This is a lot of friends and family. And there's a whole stack and we'll get into it. But interestingly enough, an online stranger is pretty well trusted to the extent that we think they're a real person. So, and as an example, there's a writer here in Iowa, Liz Lenz over in Eastern Iowa, who a few months ago wrote a really affecting essay about dads on YouTube. And maybe it's me looking in the mirror a little bit, but she talked about all these people who solve a very specific problem for themselves and then turn the camera on and publish it as a way to be helpful. Some of them probably have a YouTube channel they're monetizing, but a lot of them just figured something out and thought they would share. So it's a crystalline example, I think, of helpful and voluntary. So moving into the mechanics, this is just kind of the gut check because there's been a lot of change and some things haven't changed, but I'm just wondering how everybody feels, particularly about the internet right now. Is it a place where we're connecting? Is it a place where there's division? Is it a place where we are consuming the fruits of journalism, or is it a place we avoid because it's full of fake news? Is this a place where we're sharing what's meaningful, or is this a place where we're avoiding and talking about detoxing? I think these are part of the offline conversation right now, making headlines, is about the nature of the internet. And so if we look at markets as conversations, and we look at marketing as a thing that's supposed to be starting conversations, and we're really aiming for experiences, the things that people can do and will share, then I think it's going to be okay. 2022 especially is going to be okay. So let's narrow in then on what COVID did maybe to word of mouth. I think I mentioned Engagement Labs a moment ago. They did some more work to understand what was and wasn't changing, and fascinating that it's still face-to-face. In the time of kind of being physically separated and all this distance, we're still face-to-face and phone and text messages and email. It's still super majority of our market conversation is offline. And if there's a lot to unpack, but the tightest version here is that maybe what has changed is the need to put empathy foreground, which I think is what makes tactically, when you're thinking about marketing execution, makes conversation and word of mouth perhaps extra important. This is a protest sign on the screen. People aren't necessarily asking for it. So let's talk about in detail kind of where we're at with, because the thing I will talk endlessly about is the dearth of trust and attention, the fact that there is no audience. And trust is a thing we can measure, we can ask questions about. And you're seeing on your screen a US senator and a physician. And they're there because they represent different categories of trust. There is a bunch of research about trust in relationships. And there was a primate researcher by the name of Dunbar, and Dunbar's number is a thing you can ask Wikipedia about, but Dunbar says we only have the capacity to manage about 150 relationships. That's the universe of web of trust that we have for most people. And that the actual the closely held relationships where we really are invested in the opinions of others is much smaller, maybe 50, maybe 15. So there's a small set of people that on the daily are our guideposts. That's really what we have kind of. He was a primary researcher, the cognitive capacity to manage. And so we walk around all day being skeptical. And the internet has really accelerated this. Essentially, we're self-referential, and so tools like Google and even Facebook are become primary sources. And so we have news and our peer group, and there's this whole descending scale of kind of where trust is. But essentially, it's in decline. particularly institutional trust. And so Edelman's is large, they're a global PR firm, and they've been tracking trust for a long time. And we just, our institutional trust is in the floor, right? Disturbingly, maybe, we don't trust institutions to be ethical and competent. Apparently, it's like walking and chewing gum. You cannot do both at the same time. And so in the dearth of trust becomes opportunity for business, because across institutions, business is actually the institution most trusted to solve problems. And here's the sea of people like me. This is who we trust. The wisdom of crowds is a framework, but the research shows that a person like yourself, a peer, is as credible as an academic expert or a CEO or a board member, anybody with authority, essentially. There's a book about the death of expertise that digs in on this a little bit. So ultimately, what this does, perhaps, is invert our concept and the activation of influence, because when it's not about authority, the path looks different. A supermajority of considered purchases start with a search. 71%, yeah, of purchase journeys start with a web search. We're asking the internet a question, and then the next layer there is really to kind of truth it, right? So we're going to turn to people that we trust, including maybe strangers on the internet, to have a conversation about that category and that product. And that ultimately it is the opinion of peers that helps us make our purchase decision. So when the pyramid of influence is upside down, it's a real challenge for authority. Your experts, people who really know what's going on, have to be trusted. The institutional knowledge has to be in the hands of a market peer to really travel well. And so I think that informs kind of the approach to engaging in influence opinions. So context, here's the how, what and why, and particularly where the marketing fits. And I promise there is a top 5 list in here. So what do we share? We share things that are helpful. And I think the other thing is it's overwhelmingly positive. The tweet here is about the pocket full of glitter. What we're mostly waiting for is that moment where somebody talks about something we know and we can, bring the rainbow out of our pocket to brighten their day with something useful. And this is important. The positive nature of word of mouth is important because it's opposed to, and there may even be no meaningful correlation with online conversation, which seems to be a rage factory of late. So social media doesn't reflect offline conversation, and most of word of mouth is offline, right? They're separate ecosystems. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. This Clue Train manifesto is the old man moment. This book is more than 20 years old, but it's still sharp as ever, because not only does it describe the anatomy of market dialogue, it also talks about the role of the internet. So many years ago, these bright gentlemen, all gentlemen, I think, basically shouted out the obvious, which is that we're now everyone's a publisher now, right? And the internet really more powerfully connected customers to one another, employees to one another, and in some ways, the long tail of that section of conversation that is online is something that anybody can come to, and it has a very long tail, right? So in the balance of offline and online, I think these are the things about the means of production for storytelling and how far they can travel. With motivations, there's a great deal of research. Jonah Berger is probably one of the more widely published voices on motivations. And so I want to walk through these because I think you'll attach them. They're immediately useful. We share out of regard for our personal brand, right? We when we tell a story, we're transmitting our values. A second point here is really about supporting, embracing stakeholder feelings. He calls it emotional regulation, right? A couple more on the 5-point list is really about, it's the exclamation point, being helpful. So acquiring information, sharing knowledge. The fourth is social bonding, the power of relationship. And these show up everywhere, right? The tribal signals, the Zoom backgrounds, which I don't have a tribe for you today. Really, the social bonding is about our prime need to belong. It can look like loneliness, but it's definitely about alignment, maybe at the edge of a marathon. And then the fifth point here about the why is about, we can use the word influence, but we're really talking about just persuasion. And I would submit to you that right now, it's really hard to have kind of polarizing persuasion. Really, the empathy button is the one you want to push when we're talking about the motivations for having a conversation. So all that's in the Journal of Consumer Psychology for you to dig into. Let's talk about where it hits the road for a moment, because right, we're here to be better marketers, and some of this can be incremental. So Jay Bear, it's another sharp mind to pay attention to. She says we ignore what is average. So here's your checklist. These are the things that are a useful frame for the role of marketing in generating conversation. And I would highlight that it really is the employees and the customers who are trusted as the point of relevance. They really are the always on voices potentially. And we'll talk about the role of like the tactical execution of marketing in some detail here. But this is the incremental positive change. So threshold, according to Podium, for reputation and consideration is 3.4 stars or better, right? And a moment ago, I mentioned that most of our purchase journeys start with a search engine. So some of word of mouth looks like online reputation, right? What's the story that Google tells me about you when I ask it a question? And lest we be too angsty about this, Bright Local found that even just 3, 4, 5, 6 reviews were enough to have the trust established. So if you are a new concern, a new venture, a startup, you're creating a beauty bar and mechanic salon in Philadelphia, the bar is pretty low for social proof, right? We're aiming for remarkable, but better than average is threshold, because from that point, then we can begin to spin up conversations. And I would add here that negative online comments are a cry for help, and they're a tremendous opportunity, because when you can solve a problem in public, it speaks very loudly to the values of the organization and its concern for its people and its customers. A couple more slides on influence. Perhaps you've seen the media bias chart. I think the thing to know about media is that we're swimming around in it 12 hours a day. Literacy is very low, and attention is very scarce. But a couple points here on the market conversation. A third of us are getting our news via social media, and only 6 in 10 of us are reading news on the daily. These have implications down the line. That's Pew trusts for those of you who pay attention. And then to sharpen it up here on the distinction between online and offline, fundamentally attention doesn't equal influence. And brands are mostly ignored in online conversation. From the early days of social, what we've found is nobody's really following brands. I don't know how many of you follow companies, commercial concerns on social, but it appears to be maybe half of us do that. I'm over indexed because of my line of work, but it's curious always to take personal experience and compare it to others. The last data I saw said that maybe half of us are paying attention to brands online. And the other thing I want to say about the internet is it's fake. Specifically, maybe 60%, less than 60% of web traffic is human. On your screen is little Michaela. She has 3 million followers on Instagram as of this week. And she's not real. She's CGI. Her whole existence is a story told by people who are drawing her, essentially. And so when we look at content and people and metrics, I think there's a big asterisk around online activity because there's a lot of bots, some with intention. I think what drives it really is that we want to belong, right? That's the juice. And so a book recommendation, Cialdini. This is not a new book, but it remains powerful because he really has outlined principles for interpersonal and organizational influence. Influence is the thing we know some things about, but I don't think we fully understand. However, these 6 principles, and in the interest of time, I won't go deeply into them, really outline the conditioning of responses and how to really form a relationship that moves in productive directions. And so Shocking Squirrel is shocked here because basically what we're talking about is the opportunity to stop paying for attention and start earning more attention with your employees, with your customers, with your partners for the remarkable things that you're probably already doing. And so I thought it would be a useful exercise for us to articulate our stories, right? The stories that you know that are already told. If we could take a minute and break us out and everybody give their story, I think that would be helpful. Question is, what's the 1 minute story that's already told about your business? What's the story you know is told by internal or external folks? And if you have one, great. And if you don't, now might be the time to build it. Maybe by the time we're done here, you can build it.
Okay, so give me just a second and I will put you guys in breakout rooms. Ryan, will you run through that one more time and what you want them to discuss? While I get
Absolutely. So you're going to find yourself in a room with others and each of you take just 1 minute. And what is a story told about your business? Right now, like today, what's a story you know is told about your business? I think when we can articulate these, we're a lot closer to success. Plus, we get everybody a chance to talk about their business. So happy morning.
All right, give me just a second. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. Again, it's going to go quick. You'll have 6 minutes and we'll pull you back.
Thanks. Thanks again for the attention, everybody. I hope everybody's breakout was as electric as mine. Because apparently we all do amazing things and we all have compelling stories. And this is hopefully, this session is hopefully jet fuel for those. So again, we have to pay. Attention is scarce. We have to pay for some of it. What we really want to do is earn it. So I told you there's a top 5 list in here, and let's just get to it, right? Top 5 ways. Participate, be remarkable, celebrate your people, start conversations with your marketing dollars, and measure it. When it comes to, people will say, what do you do? I said public relations, and then they just kind of look at me because they don't really know. And PR can also mean participation required. And this is really about, kind of who is in a conversation about your brand. And are you friends with them, right? Are you in conversation? Are you listening to what they have to say? Are you asking the right questions? Are you being helpful? And again, are you responding to negativity, and are you amplifying social proof, right? This is about participation. If it's not about remarkable, at least be helpful, right? And these are, this is again, like, how do you make people feel awesome? They feel attached. They're accepted and connected. Tactically, this is about kind of boosting egos, right? Like, they associate, and that transmits. This can be just encouraging actions. It can be about attending events and checking in, and just the really granular kind of stuff. Giving both the personalities inside the organization as well as the personalities of your customers the opportunity to shine. And then, free stuff always wins. Free prize is never not going to work, right? This is why we see like online contests and stuff, because everybody likes to win. So tactically, like, a whole ocean to boil around what this stuff looks like. And again, I hope that everybody else had great stories like I was able to hear during the breakout. Our point of view at Hanser and across our offices really is about that word of mouth is about your people. There are strangers on the internet. We trust some of them, but it's really, we were talking about the offline person-to-person conversation. This is really about connecting and amplifying your stakeholders, right? The employees, they talk all day about you because they work there, right? And when we look at the customer layer, like, some of them really love you. For those of you who have a net promoter score, those folks who are on fire for you are already probably driving more business than you realize until you actually look at it and measure it. That's a story for another time. And then the point about other partners is that there might be things you want to get done that are they're too audacious, right? You can't go it alone. But there might be things that are of outsized benefit that are within reach by working together, starting a conversation. So some of this looks like building tactically, it looks like building community. And a lot of it looks like sharing their content. We're all publishers now. We're all having these conversations that can be lifted up. And powerfully, the parts that are online that can be brought offline are quietly where the action is. And I would submit to you that with all of this celebrating, to the extent that you can be specific about a goal or particularly objectives, you can measure then the word of mouth portion. Number 4 here is about your ad dollars working harder. When your marketing is starting a market conversation, when your marketing is asking questions and being helpful, it just goes further. It earns attention. And so here's what we have. I have a STEM YouTuber having this is Kotex is the brand. Kotex is having a real conversation in a category that is so filled with euphemism. And so they're just sciencing this stuff, and it's charming and disarming and helpful. And they've been at it for a while. So Kotex as an example of keeping it real and doing right by the entire market, really. The power of earning reach with paid attention. And then finally, the thing about measuring, this is a challenge in public relations, right? And it's a challenge in word of mouth marketing, but essentially it's who is saying what to whom and with what result. And again, it's two-way. So some of the value in measurement is about the response of the organization to what it's hearing and the conversation that's happening. McKinsey has a pretty good map for how this works in each phase and how to do the math on and offline in terms of the contribution to like sales and profitability, the kind of purchase journey. But in a two-way dialogue, I'm going to submit to you that Some of this is outcomes that improve operations. The customer experience and the profitability are all these things that are they're kind of secondary outcomes, if you will, from word of mouth. And the exclamation point here really is that people will pay more for a remarkable experience. And so at the end of this line, hopefully, it's just a better experience that is more profitable, right? We're going to run out of time. I don't know that if there are questions coming in, but I wanted to run through a few client examples just to hit the ground with this thing. Some of these are clients, but this BMW Motorcycles is actually our Chicago office. BMW had sales headwind with motorcycles. And what they found by listening was that it was spouses who thought motorcycles were dangerous. And so they brought in a mechanic from Germany into the garages of people in consideration. And those folks brought their friends to literally their garage, and it was with spouses, and they held basically a party. And holding forth in the center was the engineering mechanical expert from BMW, who was going garage to garage, seeding BMW as a motorcycle that was safe. They sell a lot of motorcycles now, right? For Roche, our work was really about category creation. We've all seen a 30-second spot for pharmaceuticals, which is 28 seconds of treatment effects. Doctors, patients, dietitians, third parties don't have the same FDA requirements. And so the stories that were helpful in talking about the drug were really about talking about its context, talking about the results of clinical trials, talking about value in a way that went around paying for attention in a way that's pretty onerous. This is integrated work across a lot of categories, but it's really about third parties. It's not always the experts at the center that are your in-house folks. For Pirelli, this was customers. This was very specifically customers who loved them so much that they were willing to volunteer their time to drive attendance at events. So these were ticketed events, but in the hands of an ambassador, folks could get granted free access to the show. And so what you end up with is a bunch of folks who are bought in essentially on the training methodology for this horse training methodology, which creates a long tail for profit making, because they need the videos and they need the tack and the supply. So it's a long tail on event marketing that was born of their best customers. And then Megabus, which was a category creator a number of years back, where maybe some of you know who this brand is. They launched in Chicago, and it's city to city from $1. The experience they were creating was remarkable enough that people were skeptical, and there's more to say about that. But essentially, where we found real momentum was in the prime ridership was college students, and so we just took the conversation to campuses. And this is a story about measurement, because to the extent that we were in community on campuses, which were often adjacent to stop locations, we could see the market conversation on and offline in that 2-week window that followed, driving ticket sales, people making discretionary trips just because they'd had a conversation with their peers on their campus. And then Calvin, this is about using ads to start conversations. The Calvin community is a continuing care retirement community right here in Des Moines, longstanding. And from the get, it was always about making sure that the people you see are the people who live there and work there, right? That authentic voices will always give you reach. If I see myself on a billboard, I'll probably drag some people over to see it, right? And then reading list, like I said, there's a lot of good research and understanding that is on the shelf for people. I mentioned Berger, I mentioned Bear, I mentioned Ed Keller in the context of engagement labs. There's a lot of reading to do on this thing that's been around for a long time, and it's mostly still working the way it always has. So there it is. We trust peers. We want to be, we want to belong. We want to connect with them. To the extent that your business can give people a reason, they will tell stories that are helpful, that are voluntary. When you're listening to the stories, the story that comes back, the conversation that happens, it will improve your organization. It will ultimately lead to just better days for all your people, including pocketbooks. And in the ways that are sometimes specific, but often are secondary, this is a measurable phenomenon. You don't need to fly blind. So that's 30,000 feet at 100 miles an hour. Appreciate the attention.
Ryan, we do have a question in the chat. Sorry, Christina's computer just completely just froze. So I'm Molly Davis. I work at the partnership. And Matthew Gall has a question. As a professional service provider architect, how can I encourage / grow WOMM about my services?
Yeah, make your customers famous, right? They had a process where they commissioned you to do work. So is there something about that process that was remarkable? And is there something about the outcome that's remarkable? You know, where's the opportunity to understand the value? Because architecture is one of these things that's super important. Our built environment shapes so much. But I think for most people, it's kind of invisible. And so some of it is about a conversation about values. Again, talking about like, what are the motivations to talk? It's really about the values in a built environment, but also the value, the outcome of the consultancy. So broadly, I think that's a framework for professional services generally, is make the clients famous and lift up the client voice. There is a room in there for the employee voice in how you get to the outcomes, because when we're talking about subjective calls, what color is it? What shape is it? Sometimes the guidance is also kind of a helpful thing for people to understand. So I hope that's a threshold answer.
We have another question from Christy. Have you worked with a community / chamber?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Working with some right now. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like a kaleidoscope, right? It's made of many pieces, has many things it's trying to do, probably all at the same time. I think that's the value of good planning, is to know the sequence and priority for work. Yeah.
And she has a follow-up question. Can you give an example that I can follow?
Of word of mouth in communities? Well, on Friday, I'm talking with folks from Bentonville, Arkansas. You might know Bentonville, Arkansas. Bentonville, Arkansas is the center of the universe for Walmart. And so the stories that come out of Bentonville are multifold, but one of the stories that hits me, I like bicycles, and I'm a kind of an outdoor cat. And the stories out of Bentonville about what Walmart money did to the recreation economy in Northwest Arkansas, ask the internet about that. It is in some part an architecture built with intent, right? They knew where they wanted to go, and they were planful about how to get there. But they're earning all this attention because they've built such a tremendous experience. So if you want to look at word of mouth in the context of community development, Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, Walmart's foundation, Walmart's Convention and Visitors, or excuse me, Bentonville's Convention and Visitors Bureau would be tip of the tongue.
Wonderful. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So Ryan, thank you so much for your time today and for all the knowledge that you've given us. We really appreciate it. This is our last top 5 for the year, but we will be rolling out some more in January, so look for those. But we do have some events coming up. There is hold on, I just am not on this, I'm on the spot right now. So oh crap, and my phone just died. We're just having so many technical issues over here. Yeah, so we have some events coming up. They're all on our events page, dsmpartnership.com/events. There is one happening on November 9th. That is from like 8:30 to 10:30, I believe. But more information is on our website. So feel free to check that out. And yeah, thank you so much and have a great day, everybody.